Ladies and gentlemen, the FootballScoop Podcast is back. For those of you watching, you might have noticed I almost forgot to hit the little intro, but I did it. Woo! Here we go. Week 12 preview. I'm very excited. If y'all see the screen has gotten big on me, it's getting small on John Brice. The walls are getting tight on John Brice. John Brice had like a 30-game lead on us week one, maybe week two. I think we almost missed every single game. He got every single game right. And now that lead is coming down and down. He's got a one-game lead. We're heading into the home stretch, and gosh, Johnny, you feeling okay? I see you pulling your collar. Are you a little tight right now?
No, I'm feeling good. Loose as a goose. I'm not worried. I picked to win. Hello. Even though you keep conjuring up picking games that aren't necessarily of the highest ilk, featuring the most burning competition or any such thing. Not the ones that are seared into the conscience of college football nation going into each weekend. But nonetheless, you usurped authority in the picks panel from Zach. It's gotten intriguing.
So you're saying it's gotten hard once I put real games in there rather than fluff throwaways?
No, I'm just saying that it's a different mindset.
It's a different mindset. I'm here to win. We'll see what happens. Gentlemen.
God help you if you don't. I promise you will not want to be on this podcast for a while if you don't.
A small delivery of bourbon if I don't. But if I do, it will be ice cold in my glass, and I will enjoy every sip of it. Week 12, got a lot of amazingness. There's games I want to talk about all over the country. It feels wrong, and I know, we're not chronologically, we're not talking about number one team in the country, but it just feels wrong for purposes to not start with Texas at Kansas.
All right, here we go. It's either another year of these jokes or they die for another year. So, last year Kansas won in overtime. The last 5 Texas KU games, 4 of them were decided by 7 points or less. 2 went to overtime. Obviously, Kansas won 2 of them. And it looks like Kansas is probably going to get Jalen Daniels back. Texas has scored 6 points in the last 6 quarters. Now, Texas should be able to run all over Kansas and make it difficult for the Jayhawks at that point. But, if it gets – if Kansas can string together some stops early, I think you're going to see a lot of Longhorns looking at each other like, what's happening? What are we doing, guys? So I think Texas is like a 9-point favorite, something like that. I would take Kansas.
I'm in burnt orange. Everything says Texas, right? You all pick Texas. I'm on Kansas. Rock chalk, baby. Come on. Lance Leipold shows up. Big win.
Yeah, Kansas is a good team. So they're not the joke that they were through last season. So if this is a fourth quarter game, especially with Jalen Daniels plays and plays the entire game, don't make that face. We've been talking about how good Kansas is all season long.
You just said they were a joke last season. They beat Texas.
They were, yeah, exactly.
They weren't a joke last season.
That's why we've been joking about it for the last year.
They were not a joke last season. They were a transitional team last season. I would not call them a joke. I am picking Texas this weekend. I fully expect Texas to win this contest. Here's what I think is so bizarre. This game means a lot more for Texas than it does for Kansas. Like on the here and now and on moving forward and where the two programs are, Texas needs a win over Kansas much more than Kansas needs a win over Texas. I believe that.
Yes.
Oh, everybody believes that. 100%. Just can they do it? It's so simple, but can they do it?
Not only can they will. They will do it.
Okay. Like last week was an aberration and a disaster, running for 29 yards or whatever it was. But this is a game where if you hand the ball to Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson 35 times, they should get over 200 yards, and the field should tilt in your favor from there. So if they can't do that, then it's anybody's ball game.
Every game, if you hand the ball to Bijan, Roschon, that should happen. But they don't.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Moving right along. All right, straight up. Incredible ball games all day, all night. I'm going to give you a couple. I want some quick hits on these. How about USC UCLA?
Very fired up for that. I think it's the most compelling game of the weekend. It loses a little luster because of UCLA's relatively inexplicable loss last weekend, but this is one of college football's grandest rivalries. It's one of college football's most aesthetically pleasing rivalries, and it's nice to have both of these teams completely nationally relevant in the top 15 or so, and a lot on the line. And you guys know where I stand. I still see some people debating the fact that would USC be in the CFP if it's 12-1? Yes, the USC will be in the CFP if the Trojans are 12-1. The first step to bolstering that opportunity is this weekend at the Rose Bowl against UCLA. Tremendous trash talk already going on between the two sides, but particularly Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the dynamic UCLA quarterback this week, saying, "We hate those guys. I'm not going to put it any other way. We hate those guys. We put 60 on them last year. The plan is to put 60 on them again this year."
Woo! I mean, the USC defense has been begging to be had all season long. Obviously, they lost on the road at Utah, but DTR and company should feel extremely confident that they can score on USC and score with USC. And I see this as a 45-42 type game. I'm gonna lean USC just because of Caleb Williams. That guy has just magic in his fingertips. But I think it's a close, physical, exciting. Throw in whatever adjective you want to put in there. And if UCLA wins, then the Pac-12 championship, the Pac-12 standings could be extremely wacky and convoluted. Where there's a possibility that 5 Pac-12 teams get in the year at 7-2 in conference play. But if USC wins, then they're in the Pac-12 championship game regardless. I mean, this is their last Pac-12 regular season game anyway. So if they win, they're in.
Yeah, it's a bananas set of scenarios that can unfold this weekend in the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 is the conference with the absolute most intrigue throughout it this weekend, and what should be the most intriguing slate of games when you think about Utah, Oregon. This game that we're discussing, Arizona State has a very meaningful game as well, just in terms of the big picture. So it's an exciting weekend of Pac-12 football that hopefully we're all able to actually see those games on regular network or even more attainable streaming platforms other than the invisible one that league uses. But I'm with you, Zach. This is everything. These two teams and institutions have been at the center of discussion all week long because of UCLA's impending departure to the Big Ten and because now the ivory towers and some institutions want to block that. There's this very meaningful football game. It's just ripe with subplots, but correct. Like if the Pac-12 doesn't see USC win this weekend and next weekend in the Pac-12 championship, then with the state of that conference, it's fair to ask, will we ever see them in the CFP as we know it moving forward? I think it'll be a really long time if it's not this year.
So,
well,
John,
obviously with the 4-team format, because when it moves to 12, yeah, when it moves to 12, they'll be in. But yeah, so the last time they made it was 2016 with Washington, Chris Peterson's Washington team.
Yeah.
So you'd be looking at, what is that, a 6-year drought at this point?
Yeah.
That would have seemed unfathomable in 2016 when they had Washington, and then 2 years prior they had Oregon in the title game.
Right.
John, you seemingly scoffed at the idea that a 12-1 USC wouldn't make the playoff. And I think there's only one scenario where that comes into play. And in my mind, that scenario is pretty clear, especially because LSU is ranked 1 ahead of SC. If LSU beats Georgia in an absolutely riveting, compelling SEC championship game and TCU wins out and either Ohio State or Michigan wins out, I think USC gets left out. If that happens, that's a really tight scenario. Who knows? But
maybe. I'm still not convinced that with what USC has on its schedule right now, that if it wins these next 3 games, and that's a huge if, I'm still not convinced of it. But if USC wins these next 3 games, even in your scenario, Scott, then I would think that it would be Georgia, the Ohio State, Michigan winner, TCU, and USC at 12-1 with a 1-point road loss in over an 11-2 LSU that has a 27-point home loss.
Don't think so.
Based on precedent,
We can bet.
based on the committee's precedent, it would have to be USC. Like 2 losses and a blowout loss, especially at home, have always been disqualifying in the previous 8 years.
You would
And
have your
I
two.
understand that that's falling on deaf ears for our Baton Rouge lobby.
I know. Is he doing this podcast today, Zach, live from Baton Rouge, or is he on K Street like a natural lobbyist in D.C.? If LSU has 2 losses and the criteria is against USC as a 1-loss Pac-12 champion with a 1-point loss on the road, and your LSU, here's another thing we're ignoring. Their 2 losses
means more.
Their 2 losses would be both within their home state. You want to put them in the playoffs and they can't even go undefeated in their own state? Get out.
If they beat Georgia in a compelling championship game, all bets are off. USC is right behind LSU right now, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Moving on.
It's not all bets off. It's our bet is on.
Moving on, gentlemen. I'm sorry for your loss. All right. We got a lot of stuff. Let's stay in the Pac-12 real fast. Utah, Oregon. Huge
to me, it's all about whether or not Bo Nix plays. Sorry, Zach. I picked Utah, I believe, in our picks, and it's strictly because I can't get a handle on whether or not Bo Nix will play, but it didn't sound very convincing that he would play or be anywhere remotely likely to play the entire 4 quarters. So I like the physicality of Utah with that backdrop.
I mean, you look at Utah's schedule. They lost at Florida by 3 points on the road. Obviously threw an end zone interception to lose the game. And then they lost to UCLA by 10 on the road. But ever since then, I mean, they've dominated just about everyone they've played. It seems like Kyle Whittingham has that team peaking at the right time. We know they'd feel comfortable in a Pac-12 championship rematch with USC. I picked Oregon because of the home field, and they've been playing extremely well, save for that Washington loss where they didn't really play all that bad. So this is the toughest game of the weekend for me to pick.
Very tough. I agree. I think both this and UCLA are, who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Transition to the Big 12. TCU, Baylor.
It's weird that TCU is a 2.5-point favorite here when they went on the road last week and pummeled Texas. But they're lights out. And then against Texas, and Baylor's we last saw was just completely flatlined at home against K-State. And obviously, this is a rivalry game. You expect Baylor to give TCU its best shot, but TCU is just humming right now and coming off a win where they didn't have their best offensively, but they were still able to get an authoritative win with their defense. I think TCU wins this game 10 to 14 points.
Yeah, I completely agree. Had we seen something different from Baylor a couple of weeks ago in a similarly styled matchup, then I would perhaps lean a little bit more towards Baylor. But no, I have not seen enough out of Baylor, and I continue to see TCU reach new levels every single week. I'm much more a TCU believer after what they did to Texas than I have been at any point this season, just because of we finally saw the TCU defense completely bottle up a really quality opponent. So I'm TCU in this game and also don't understand the line.
So I think for those people nationally listening to this, they probably don't have the slightest. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but this is a legit don't like each other type game. Like TCU and Baylor, not friends.
No, so when the game kicks off, this game will, I believe, tie the Texas A&M series for most played rivalry within the state of Texas. It's in the top 15 nationally. They're only about an hour and a half apart. They recruit similar types of players. They recruit similar types of students. Obviously, if you've grown up in the church system, no groups of people hate each other more than different types of different sects of Christianity. So obviously, Baylor takes its Christianity more seriously than TCU does, but they're both private schools from the same neighborhood. And moving forward, I mean, this could be the marquee series of the new look Big 12, because you got a Baylor program that won the Big 12 last year, TCU program that's probably going to win the Big 12 this year, and you had such personalities of Gary Patterson versus Art Briles. Obviously, Sonny Dykes and Dave Rand are diametrically opposite of those guys, but there's a lot of animosity on both sides.
And to be clear, Zach said sex, SECTS, because I was looking at a text message on my phone and I had to do a double take with my ears. So SECTS.
Thank you, JB.
All right. This year, this one doesn't headline us, but it's still Bedlam. So we got Oklahoma State going to Norman. What do we think?
Two teams that have had alternately some very stirring performances and two teams that have had some absolute laydown performances. I think in this game, I'm giving the edge to Mike Gundy and company because of their overall experience and their overall experience specific to this contest. And so I know Oklahoma's the home team, and I think even Oklahoma is favored by 2.5 points or something. But I just think the Cowboys will find a way to get it done.
I went with Oklahoma. Obviously, the performance last week against West Virginia does not inspire any sort of confidence. But Oklahoma is like 90-10 all time against Oklahoma State. They have a mental edge against this program. Obviously, they lost last year. They're going to be at home. I think it should be a good atmosphere. It's a rare Bedlam game that doesn't really have Big 12 championship implications. Mm-hmm. But I think the Oklahoma fan base will embrace this game for what it is and an opportunity to make something of a bad season. Agreed. And I think Oklahoma rides that to a 7 to 10 point victory.
So I see Oklahoma State winning the game. I do think it'll have all the vinegar that Bedlam should have. I think it'll be a great game. It'll be fun to watch. Okay, so we're at 17 minutes. When you agree to do a football podcast and you check all the boxes with Apple, one of the rules is by the first 20 minutes, you have to mention an SEC football game. So we're getting really close. So I have to transition to the SEC. All right, so we got a couple of games, quick hits. Georgia, Kentucky.
No. Georgia's a 21.5 point favorite. It's a night game in Lexington. I like the Bulldogs by 28 plus. Kentucky's offense is terrible. They're really bad in the red zone. They're a shell of what they have been on the offensive line. And as I've documented repeatedly here, Will Levis is a bit of a turnover machine. And while this is almost 20 minutes in, just referencing our first SEC matchup, let's not forget the political stumping you've already done for LSU much earlier in the podcast.
It might check the box. I agree.
Okay, so I think it's more likely that Georgia shuts out Kentucky than it is that Kentucky covers the 19 or whatever it is.
See? I would agree. All right, let's go through some other ones real quick. Ole Miss is at Arkansas. Ole Miss can handle them or no?
No.
This game is always really weird, isn't it?
Yes,
really weird.
It wasn't a fumble and all. Yeah,
the fumble that wasn't a fumble 2 years ago. Last year, I think it was a 2-point conversion that decided the game. That was just absolutely an incredible contest. This one is a night game in Vietnam. I think it's going to be a fabulous college football contest, especially if KJ Jefferson plays. Sam Pittman on Wednesday's SEC teleconference indicated a great opportunity for KJ Jefferson to play, expects him to play. Arkansas is better than its record. I'm a believer in that. I know that Bill Parcells says you are what your record says you are. And so Arkansas is a 6-4 team, but Arkansas and Sam Pittman, I'm riding with them this weekend.
I mean, if KJ Jefferson had played last week, they probably beat LSU.
And LSU would still be in the playoffs.
I don't know what country I grew up in, but I've never heard the term Vietnam. That was unbelievable. I mean, that was the highlight of this entire podcast. Well done, young man. All right, so on the upset alert, I think Texas A&M has a shot to beat UMass.
I don't know the 33 points. Can A&M score 33? I don't know. So they'd have to hold UMass to negative points, but they should be enough to get the win.
If you don't score 33 against UMass, that might be enough for them to pony up $85 million.
That is an improved UMass program with what they've done there. I know what you're saying, and I'm not putting any sort of spin on this Texas A&M game or anything. There's no more disappointing team in college football this year than Texas A&M. I'm not sure that across the past decade, or maybe even since the 2000s, there's a single more disappointing college football team than this Texas A&M football team. There will be magnificent changes throughout that program when we get to the offseason. There's going to be heavy changes. I'm not sitting here saying at the Jimbo Fisher level, but that program a year from now, roster-wise, assistant coaching staff-wise, will not look remotely the same as it does now.
So A&M is obviously a program that prides itself on its tradition and its atmosphere at Kyle Field. The Florida game was deader than dead in terms of atmosphere. I would love to see what the atmosphere is like for a 3-7. It's a noon kick, right? 11 a.m. kick. 3-7 Aggies taking on UMass. I mean, it's going to set all whatever. Aggie fans can tell me the best atmosphere they've seen. Whatever that is, this is going to be the diametric opposite of that.
You keep saying that, Zach. I think that Florida played the crowd right out of it. I thought it was a solid showing from the crowd when it was halftime of that Florida-Texas A&M game, and it was 24-20 Aggies or whatever it was at halftime. I thought it was an admirable, no DKR atmosphere, unlike some others on here, but an admirable.
If Where's Waldo shows up again in the app shirt, and at the end he takes it off and has a UMass shirt. All right, moving right along. I got a great story about Jimbo. We'll share that another day. Okay, couple of UAB's coming to Baton Rouge. It's a night game, late game, and it's 8 o'clock start. Tigers, you got to take care of business. UAB's coming, and they're hungry.
Yeah, I think a 14.5-point line. I know this is not a gambling show. I studied them making picks last night and this morning, so they're fresh on my mind. I look for LSU to have a much more seamless offensive performance than it did a week ago when it was so disjointed in the cold at Arkansas. And I think LSU rolls in this game. Brian Kelly, as you've alluded to several times, Scott, as I'd seen firsthand here in South Bend the last few years, is a very CEO-like organizer of his programs. And I think this will be a business-like approach from LSU, and they will just systematically dispatch UAB, which we should note, by the way, is getting very, very close to naming a new head coach. A lot of quality candidates. They've interviewed some big-time head coaches at the FCS level already, some really compelling guys, and they've interviewed some top-notch assistants as well. And I think they've got a sneaky good candidate out there who's a sitting head coach right now.
Yeah, so BK said it, to go back to LSU, it said it's business as usual as they've clinched the SEC West and prepare for that big game with Georgia in 2 weeks. So that's the atmosphere, or that's the attitude you want to take as you've got 2 cupcake games coming up between in Georgia.
I love the fact that you just casually throw every dagger you can at Texas A&M.
You got to get in while the getting's good.
Tennessee is at South Carolina. This is a game Tennessee needs to continue to get back on track. They need to stretch their lead out here. South Carolina obviously doesn't want that to do. South Carolina wants to win the game. I think the Vols win by going away type numbers. Thoughts?
Yeah, I just don't think South Carolina has enough offensively. Marshawn Lloyd is a really, really good running back. He's been dinged up a bit, especially this back half of the season. Spencer Rattler continues to be just a complete enigma at the quarterback position. All the physical tools, doesn't ever seem to quite put it together for 4 full quarters or for a full month of football. He reminds me a little bit of Jarrett Garantano, whom Vol fans know quite well. And so I think Tennessee just comes out and, again, silences the crowd early inside Williams-Brice Stadium. It's a great stadium name. Mm-hmm. And then just really runs away with things.
Yeah, Tennessee put up 700-something yards and 66 points against the Missouri defense that has played pretty well. And so we've seen it now for 10 weeks. Unless you have the horses that Georgia has, you're just going to get avalanched against this Tennessee offense.
Yeah, and let's remember that's a Missouri defense that went to Columbia and completely bottled up and throttled down the Gamecocks and physically commanded that game. So I don't see a scenario for South Carolina to be very competitive in this game going into the fourth quarter. And again, I've alluded to it. That's why losing that Missouri game was so damaging to South Carolina, because their closing three was at Florida, home against Tennessee, and next week against Clemson.
Remind me when we get to Clemson. I got a story for you. Well, let's go to Clemson. So let's transition to the ACC. I didn't want to talk too much about the Miami-Clemson game because I'm not that excited about it, to be honest. But I do have to tell you guys. So this week we published Zach's annual piece, Nuclear Winter. This was eighth year Nuclear Winter. Absolutely hilarious.
Must read.
It gets brought back to my attention every single year that some people, including athletic administrators at the highest level, believe that we're actually predicting what is going to happen. A guy, he's an athletic director of a major institution in this country, reached out to me and said, I really don't see Dabo going to Clemson. I was like, no, we weren't. No, we weren't really saying that would happen. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. All right.
It's the definition of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. And just about all of it sticks.
He's like, I wanted to let you know, Scott, I really don't see that happening. I was like, no, I know. I don't either. Good talk. All right. So Clemson handles Miami. Clemson kind of gets it right here. Yeah.
I think Miami might rise up and make this a close contest into the third quarter. And then I think Clemson's depth sort of gives them time to pull away. But I think Miami shows up and has a little something for the Tigers in the first half.
I didn't think Clemson was going to beat Louisville. So for them to win that game, convincingly impressed me for the Tigers.
I feel the same way. I thought Louisville was going to win that game. Clemson just had it in control and just kept advancing the lead consistently. Okay, this one might not be in the best weather, so it might not be the best game of the day, but I think it's going to be exceptionally competitive. Duke is at Pitt.
Duke has an opportunity to win. If they get to the bowl, if they win their bowl game and then win out, they can win 10 games for the second time in program history. Like, this has been a season of first-year head coaches just killing it all across the country. Sonny Dykes, Lincoln Riley, Jim Mora, Brian Kelly, and we cannot forget Mike Elko. Like, I mean, the freshman coach of the year award that doesn't really exist is hot competition all across the board.
And I'll tell you, he stepped into a place where it was just stagnant. Cutcliffe had done fine. It was just stagnant. He wasn't coming off the good Cutcliffe years. He was coming off the, hey, Cut, I think it's time, buddy.
And I think Cutcliffe owns the only other 10-win season in Duke history. I believe around 2014 or so, they went like 10-4.
2013, I think, when they played Florida State in the ACC title game.
I'm proud to be associated with the FootballScoop various awards that are done. We should add a freshman coach of the year. We should add a first time coach of the year award. I like that. I think that's a good thought.
So where I would go with that, I like the idea as well, but it's got to be a situation like where Elko, where he took an existing core and just changed the dynamics rather than he stepped into a great situation and won with other people's players. But I'm with you.
Plus I think it needs to be a first-year head coach, not just a guy in a new scene. But anyway, something to think about.
We can make up awards as we go. I enjoy doing that. NC State's at Louisville. Real potential in this one as well for weirdness.
Yeah, the best game of the weekend in the ACC, in my opinion. And I don't think any of this snow that I'm getting absolutely deluged with here in South Bend is going to make it the 4.5 or 5 hours to Louisville. But not ideal weather for the weekend. But look, if NC State is incompetent enough to lose at home to Boston College, then it's absolutely capable of losing at a resurgent and revived Louisville team that, though it did not win last weekend at Clemson, it also didn't get embarrassed like we've seen Louisville at times do in recent years, especially when it's had some breaks go against it. Instead, I think Scott Satterfield's program has shown tremendous mettle and character over the course of this season, especially after some really heartbreaking losses. That 36-35 loss on a Friday night to Florida State is really seared in my mind, and I thought it might be when it broke Louisville. It did not. I like the Cardinals at home in this game. And again, NC State lost at home when they had taken a 14-0 lead in the first quarter against Boston College, which finished with 3 turnovers and 23 rushing attempts for -1 yard.
That's not good at all.
Well said all around, John.
Thank you. Put that in your winning box scores.
Okay.
So we're 30 minutes into this podcast, and I feel like we went through 3 or 4 Pac-12 games, 3 or 4 Big 12 games. We jumped to the SEC for the requisite 4 or 5 games. Went to the ACC for 2 or 3 games. You're like, all right, let's talk about the good games in the Big Ten.
Technically, Michigan,
Maryland,
Illinois, but
I mean, what do we got? Maryland, Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan,
and then some 4-3 Big Ten West teams playing another 4-3 Big Ten West team. I mean, the game of the week is Michigan, Illinois, but even Vegas has that as a 31-14 Michigan win.
Rutgers, Penn State, right? Come on. Greg Schiano, James Franklin, couple of warm and fuzzies.
I mean, you really think like the 2 big games are Illinois, Michigan, and Maryland, Ohio State, and Michigan's almost a 20-point favorite, and Ohio State's a 4-touchdown favorite. It's like, all right. Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's shades of 2006 in that, Michigan and Ohio State rolled through those seasons, and everyone assumed it was the national title game, and Ohio State obviously won and kicked its feet up from there. It's going to be more than likely 12-0 Michigan, 12-0 Ohio State, but I think we've evolved to the point where whoever emerges from that is going to probably be an underdog in the SEC or in the college football playoff and fighting uphill from there, because I think we all kind of see what the Big Ten is. The Big Ten is see the Big Ten for what it is.
We'll see if it's Ohio State or Michigan as a 2 seed against number 3 seed TCU, let's say, then I would expect the Big Ten team to be favored in that scenario. My Big Ten prediction for the weekend is that Rutgers covers against Penn State. I think it's 17.5 points.
Tune into BTN, everybody.
Penn State's been playing better, honestly, of late.
Yeah.
People mock the fact that this week of the year, SEC, like Alabama's got Austin P and stuff like that. 3 touchdown favorite, 4 touchdown favorite. Great. Good talk, Big Ten. All right. Let's give me some FCS action. JB, you got anything?
Yes. Let's go. The game of the year in FCS this weekend, a game that I desperately want to attend at some point in time, and that is the GrizCat Bowl, the Montana State rivalry in Bozeman, host site of ESPN College Game Day this weekend. You have the number 4 FCS scoring offense from Taylor Housewright and Montana State against the number 4 scoring defense of the Montana Grizzlies. This rivalry goes all the way back to 1897. We've got some SEC rivalries that date to around the early 1890s. But let's remember, Montana hadn't been a state that long in 1897. But by God, they played football. And Montana has had a commanding edge over the past 15 years. They're 9-6 in this rivalry. I believe they won a year ago, although Montana State has had the overall edge of late. But Montana won very convincingly a year ago when Montana State had a lot riding on it. I like Montana State in this contest, but it's a fabulous, fabulous football series. It's an incredible rivalry. You will not see a better atmosphere anywhere in the land Saturday than what you see for this Montana State game. I'm very passionate about it. If you watch the TV broadcast tomorrow, you're going to see the M Trail shown there on the mountains in Bozeman. Jess and I hiked the M Trail up to the Big M on the side of the hill overlooking downtown Bozeman and the Montana State campus a few years ago. It's fabulous. Watch this game, people. Watch this game.
I love it.
On top of that, you got 3 conference championship games. These are just regular season games that happen to decide their conference title. You got Gardner-Webb and North Carolina A&T playing for the Big South title in the AQ. You've got Davidson and Dayton playing for the Pioneer League title in AQ. You got St. Francis and Merrimack playing for the Northeast title. Although Merrimack can't make the playoffs because of their reclassifying. And then we could have a coin flip, a literal coin flip, decide possibly the 24th AQ bid, or the 24th bid, in the Ohio Valley, because Southeast Missouri State and UT Martin are both undefeated in conference play and did not and will not play each other. So if you're a bubble team, your season could ride on heads or tails from the Ohio Valley Conference. What does it get any better than that? I don't think so.
Yeah, and a couple of more great games I would be remiss not to mention. I referenced last weekend. Princeton hosts Penn with the Ivy League title on the line. 7-2 Penn against 8-1 Princeton. That's really awesome. Go ahead, Zach, interject.
Well, and then also you have Harvard Yale. So you got 5-1 teams playing 2 4-2 teams. So if Penn and Harvard win, you got a 4-way tie in an 8-team league.
Yeah, exactly. Another incredible matchup this weekend, William and Mary at Richmond. This has been an absolute breakthrough season for William and Mary. This has been a very needed season of success for Richmond, but I still think Richmond has a bit more on the line in this game than does William and Mary. So that's another one that I'm really excited to follow this weekend. Colgate football has been disappointing this year. They play at Fordham to close up their regular season this weekend. But shout out Colgate basketball for laying it on Syracuse this week. That was enjoyable. And I had one more here that I wanted to specifically reference. Well, Jackson State is at Alcorn State. We hear a lot of talk about the crowd attendance at Jackson Memorial Stadium and what Dion has done, and it's undeniable. They're averaging, I think, upper 40s to low 50s. 50,000 in attendance there. This game is at Alcorn. I was told this week, bro, it will be a madhouse. We'll have about 40,000 inside the stadium and 40,000 in the parking lots outside the stadium. So those two teams are not separated by much. There's a lot of intense rivalry feelings in that contest. And Alcorn believes that if they block that really talented Jackson State D-line, this can be anybody's game going into the fourth quarter.
So when I wrote my, FCS preview during the week, I had just, combing different bracketologist sites. I don't claim to be an FCS bracketologist myself. I'm just an amateur. But, combing through them, I had 23 teams as feeling good about it in a 24-team tournament. So for that 24th bid, depending on how things shake out, I'm hoping Fordham gets it. They've lost 2 games. They lost to Ohio, who might win the MAC 59-52. And they lost to undefeated Holy Cross 53-52. So they score 45 points or more every single week, and I would love to see them in the field.
Speaking of Ohio, shout out once again to the Bobcats. I think they've got about an 8-win season now. And shout out to Scott LaFleur and Bowling Green. We know that Scott had the very serious, very dire health situation in August during camp, had to leave the team. I mean, he point blank said that he thought he could have died. And this was a do or die season in a lot of ways, not to make light of it for Bowling Green football under his leadership. And they've responded, and I've just been really thoroughly impressed. They had an incredible win the other night against Toledo as that game was winding to its close in snow. Just a huge moment. So really excited for Scott LaFleur and those guys, really excited at Ohio for all of those coaches. And Brian Metz and a bunch of those guys on the offensive staff have really engineered an incredible turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio, I think they were 2-3 to start the season. I think they won 6 straight. Tim Alman there's a lot of questions early, and boys, he got that ship righted. That's a strong football team right now. Thank goodness for Maction. It's been great. Ladies and gentlemen, we're starting D2, D3 playoffs. The FCS regular season is coming to an end. Football Scoop's never been busier. This weekend, we expect to have full coverage heading into Monday, Tuesday, and the final week of the FBS regular season, conference championships, all the likes. It's going to be a great time to follow Football Scoop. I'm at Football Scoop. He's at Zach _Barnett. John D. Brice 1. Let's go, baby. Let's go watch some football games. Thanks, guys.